The crown is lifted, it glitters with gold and jewels, but pressed against her head it feels heavier than stone, not a symbol of glory, a wound. She is 12, she is sacred, she is disposable. The hall cheers, flutes echo, banners sway, but her breath is shallow, trapped beneath silk and ceremony. Every step echoes like a verdict, every gaze pins her down. What is a queen, if her crown is carved from her own blood? They will not tell you the truth. They will not tell you that the groom is her brother, that the vows placed in her mouth were not chosen but forced, that the kiss was not tender but calculated, that her womb was not her own. They will not tell you she carried a child before she carried a childhood, that she bled alone in a chamber while the court drank toasts in her name, that she died delivering the dynasty's heir, while they rewrote her story as sacrifice, as sanctity, as miracle. But we will. Here we speak of the girls who were dressed in gold and erased before they could speak. We speak of those the palaces buried, not only in marble tombs, but in silence. And if you believe these stories deserve to be remembered, not as fairy tales, not as legends, but as warnings, stay, listen, and subscribe. Because her crown was a wound, her voice was stolen, her life was brief, but her truth can still be heard. She was born beneath a red moon. The sky itself seemed to bleed that night, and the court whispered it was destiny, a sign from the heavens, a promise that their fragile bloodline could be reborn. Her first cry was strong, too strong for a newborn, they said. Her skin was pale, her tiny fists already clenched as if she had entered the world ready to fight. The midwives crossed themselves. The priest declared it divine favour. But no one remembered her mother's voice, her mother's cries, her mother's silence. For 3 days the queen bled, her life draining slowly, hidden behind velvet curtains. The court ignored her. They praised the infant instead. They did not carve hymns for the woman who laboured. They carved prophecy into the body of the child. At baptism, the bishop lowered the girl into the water. When she opened her eyes, she stared at him, unblinking. And the bishop, a man twice broken by war, shivered. They called it a sign. They called it power. But she was only an infant, whose gaze they mistook for divinity. From that moment, she was no longer his, no longer her mother's. She belonged to the kingdom. At 3, they trained her to fold her hands when she walked. At 4, they took away her toy horse. Queens don't ride. At 5, her tutor placed treaties in her lap instead of stories. Every lesson stripped away the child, leaving only a vessel, a symbol. Every doll she owned wore a crown. Every mirror whispered the same command. You are not a girl. You are an heir. You are a relic. She was watched, measured, moulded. Her food weighed to keep her body pure. Her spine measured to ensure it would bear the future. She was told not to run. Running made the blood too hot, and the blood must stay cool, preserved, for the dynasty. She asked why once, why she could not laugh, or chase, or play. They told her, because her children would carry the throne in their teeth. She was 5, and already her womb was a kingdom. Her mother's tears vanished from memory, her cries at birth replaced with prophecies. Her small hands curled into fists became a banner of power. From cradle to crown, she was never a child. She was property, a vessel of blood, a symbol wrapped in swaddling cloth. And symbols are not allowed to choose. They are only held and used until they break. Her childhood was not filled with fairy tales. There were no bedtime stories, no whispered legends of dragons and heroes. Instead, her tutors placed treaties in her lap, pages of law and agreements between men who had never met her, but had already decided her fate. At 5 years old, she was memorizing bloodlines, not lullabies. Her father would lift her onto his knee smiling. You will marry a king, he said, as if it were a promise. But her uncle, colder, sharper, always corrected him. She will not marry a king. She will make one. From that day, every lesson was not about her life. It was about the life she was expected to create. Her meals were measured, her steps restricted. Even the curve of her spine was inspected, as if she were an heirloom to be preserved. Slowly she began to understand. She was not seen as a child. She was seen as inheritance. And then, one morning, the bells rang. The palace erupted in celebration. Not for her triumph, not for her dreams, but for what she represented. The kingdom declared itself secure. A heavy necklace was placed around her neck, the crest of her house etched deep into the gold. "It will remind you who you are," her mother whispered. But it did not feel like a gift. It felt like a chain. And as its weight pressed against her collarbone, she understood what the kingdom had been teaching her all along. Her voice was not hers. Her body was not hers. Her life was not hers. She was not raised as a girl. She was raised as a vessel groomed in silence, for a throne that would one day claim her. The day of her wedding began with silk. Ivory silk pulled tight around her ribs until her breath came shallow. Threads of gold embroidered into lions, suns, winged serpents, symbols of purity, of power, of divinity. They scratched her skin every time she moved. Women cloaked in veils tightened the gown. They whispered blessings she did not understand. They told her she was becoming holy. But she only felt small. So small her feet dangled above the marble floor when she sat on the wedding throne. Outside the music swelled. Flutes, drums, the echo of celebration. Inside, silence pressed down heavier than the crown waiting for her head. The door creaked open. He stepped in. Her brother, 4 years older, still a boy in most eyes. But today, the crown sat on his brow, and the court called him Majesty. She remembered the boy who once tucked her braid into her collar and called her his little lion. But that boy was gone. In his place stood a king who walked toward her not as a brother, but as a groom. She rose when they told her. She knelt when they gestured. She repeated the vows they had placed on her tongue like bitter wine. Her hand slipped into his, not by choice but by command. His palm was warm, steady, too familiar. She did not look at him. She fixed her eyes on a single candle flickering just behind his shoulder. If she stared long enough, she thought perhaps the flame would blind her to what was happening. The crowd erupted when their lips met. Not a tender kiss, not a brother's kiss, a king's kiss, public, measured, deliberate. Pain bit into her fingers where the embroidery dug deep. Her hands trembled, though she held them tight. Her body was ice as he led her down the aisle. The tapestry weavers would later stitch this moment in thread. The radiant queen in white and gold, veil floating like a ghost, her smile serene. But they would not weave the truth. They would not weave the ache in her ribs, the shaking in her hands, the cold that seeped into her bones as the kingdom cheered. On that day, she was crowned not as a girl, not as a bride, but as a vessel, a symbol for the throne, a sacrifice the court disguised as glory. And that night, no games were played in the garden, no stories whispered by candlelight. That night, there was only a bed, only her body, only silence, and no stories were told, only silence. The first night, he knocked, not like a husband, like a stranger. She sat at the edge of the bed, knees pulled close, a nightdress chosen by someone else. Her hair brushed until it shone, her braid loosened to fall across her shoulder. The candles flickered as the door opened. He smiled. She did not. He called her my lioness. But she felt like prey. He moved slowly, carefully, as if gentleness could disguise what was about to happen. He kissed her cheek, held her hand. She did not resist. She'd been taught the lessons well. Never tremble. Never cry in a way that makes noise. Never resist. The bed did not creak, but she did. And when it was over, when he finally left, she lay still, eyes wide open, breath shallow. The sheets smelled of lavender and sweat. She stared at the canopy above, tracing the carved angels with her gaze. But the angels did not answer. The next morning, they called it love. The court celebrated. A poet sang verses about moonlit passion between crowned siblings. The ladies-in-waiting giggled behind their fans. Her mother-in-law, her aunt, smiled and said she had the glow of a wife. No one asked why her hands shook as she lifted her goblet. No one asked why her eyes were hollow. This became the rhythm of her days. Silk in the morning, silence at night, gold by request, naked by command. At court she was radiant. At night she was erased. Her words disappeared first. She answered only in nods, smiles when told, laughter never. Her diary disappeared next. A maid found it beneath her pillow, filled with dreams of escape. By dawn, the book was gone. So was the maid. She learned. Silence was survival. Silence was obedience. Silence was expected of queens. And so, piece by piece, she vanished. Her words, her smile, herself. And yet, outside those locked chambers, the kingdom praised her. Priests blessed her as holy. Poets immortalized her as divine. The people believed she was cherished. But you know better now. Pause. Reflect. See the truth in the gap between what they painted and what she lived. Holiness, they called it. But it was manipulation. Radiance, they praised. But it was obedience forced at the edge of her own silence. She was not a queen in those nights. She was a ghost in the making. A girl dissolving into ritual, and each time the knock came again, the silence grew heavier, and she grew smaller. The first time she vomited into her sleeve. No one saw, no one helped. She wiped her mouth on lace, staring at the red threads blooming through white, and she said nothing. That was lesson 1. Queens do not speak of pain. By the end of the week, the palace knew. The bishop declared it a miracle. The court physician bowed lower than ever. They called it destiny fulfilled. They called it God's will. She was 12, and her stomach was rising. Her body no longer belonged to her. It belonged to them, to the court, to the kingdom, to the dynasty waiting for an heir. Everywhere she went, eyes followed, every step weighed, every bite dissected. Ministers spoke of her as if she were not in the room. The succession is secure. The prophecy is fulfilled. Not one of them spoke her name. Not one of them said the word pregnant. That would have been too human. Instead, they spoke in riddles and scripture, as if her womb were not flesh, but altar. The court painter began a new portrait. The queen as vessel. Her figure wrapped in flowing robes, one hand resting on her belly, eyes lifted toward heaven, holy, serene, silent. It was not her. It was never her. She asked once if she could visit her mother's grave. They told her no. Too much risk. Too much movement. Too many eyes. She asked if her brother would come less now. They told her no. That would look suspicious. Her loneliness deepened. Her body swelled. Her days shrank into silence. At night she kept a piece of bread beneath her pillow, not for herself, for the child, in case the baby came hungry, in case she did not make it through. It was a child's gesture, born of desperation, the last flicker of a girl already being erased. The priest blessed her daily. The midwives measured her hips. The ministers praised her obedience. No one asked if she was afraid. The sickness grew worse. Her bones ached, her skin itched, her limbs heavy as stone. She bled once, just once, and the palace froze. The physician was summoned in the night, his hands cold as he whispered, "You must stay very still now. For the child. For the crown." So she stayed still. staring at dust motes drifting in beams of light, counting the rhythm of footsteps outside her chamber, silence swallowing her, day after day. And then, one night, she felt it, a flutter deep inside, the wingbeat of something alive. The baby moved. It brought her no joy, only terror, because in that moment she understood. This was not prophecy, not miracle, it was real. There was a life growing inside her, and it belonged to her brother. She clutched the bread beneath her pillow. Her eyes stung with unshed tears, and the truth settled heavy as stone. She was 12. Her womb was the kingdom's throne, and she was no longer a girl at all, she was the vessel of the crown. It began with a pain, not the sharp kind, the slow kind. A coil winding deep in her spine, crawling into her thighs like something alive. She tried to stand. The world spun, her knees buckled. A midwife caught her before she hit the floor. Too soon, they whispered. Too early. But the child did not care. The room was cleared. Curtains drawn. Windows sealed. A brazier lit near the bed, filling the chamber with smoke so thick it made her gag. They lowered her onto the mattress with careful, practiced hands. Hands that did not comfort. Hands that positioned, prepared, controlled. There were 6 women in the chamber now. None of them spoke her name. Only titles, only commands, only prayers. The pain thickened. It rolled through her body in waves, slow, merciless, unrelenting. Her fingers clawed at the sheets. Her feet pushed against the mattress, her nightgown soaked with sweat, then blood. They told her everything was fine, that this was normal, that queens had endured this for centuries. She screamed, not words, not even sound that could be understood, just fear. A raw cry pulled from the part of her that still remembered being a child, hiding under her mother's cloak during thunderstorms. That child still lived inside her, and that child was begging. She cried out for her mother, but no one came. Her brother waited outside the chamber. He was not pacing, he was not weeping. He was speaking with his advisors about the child's name, about coronation plans, about how to announce the heir. Inside, her body was unravelling. The baby would not turn. The midwives pressed on her stomach, forced her legs wider, murmured words she did not understand. Her eyes rolled back, her lips cracked and dry. One of the women held her hand and whispered, "You are brave." She wasn't. She was dying. The air was heavy with blood and herbs, her body trembling, burning, breaking beneath the weight of a kingdom that had been placed inside her. The hours dragged. The chamber echoed with the rustle of skirts, the clatter of bowls, the muttered prayers of priests outside the door. Her screams turned hoarse. Her breath came in gasps. Her voice dwindled to silence. And then, at last, the cry of another, a child, a boy. They wrapped him in cloth of gold. They paraded him before the midwives, before the priests, before the waiting advisors. They called it a miracle, a gift from heaven. She never saw his face. They took him from her arms before she could even reach. The physician leaned close, whispered something only she could hear. But her eyes were already closing. Her lips moved once, just once. No one knows what she said. Her body stilled. Her chest did not rise. Her hands slipped from the sheets. They covered her with velvet. They called it a complication. They said she was too fragile. They said it was fate. They said it was holy. They said it was sacrifice. But no one said the truth. She was not fragile. She was 12. The bells did not toll for her. They tolled for him, the heir, the dynasty's salvation. Wine poured through the halls. Advisors raised goblets. Poets sharpened their quills. The court celebrated not her life, but her death's convenience. The baby was paraded in a silver cradle lined with red silk. He was kissed, blessed, praised. His silence called wisdom, his cry called divine. and while he was carried through marble corridors, she lay still, her body cooling beneath a velvet sheet. No one wept, no one mourned, her name already dissolving into silence. They commissioned portraits, the queen in eternal sleep, the mother sovereign. In every canvas she was serene, eyes closed, lips faintly smiling, child cradled against her arms. But it was a lie. She never held him, not once. They carved statues, stone turned into sanctity, a girl seated, child in lap, gaze lifted to heaven. But it was a falsehood. Her lap was empty when she died, her gaze fixed only on pain. The poets wrote verses of her obedience, they sang hymns of her purity. Priests called her holy. The people were told she had chosen this fate. Victim was replaced with saint, child was replaced with mother, silence was replaced with song. But the truth was buried, not recorded, not honoured, erased. She was not a symbol, she was not divine, she was not willing. She was a girl, 12 years old, married to a brother, used for her womb, erased for the crown. They painted her holding him, but she never did. They thought they erased her. But history does not vanish. It leaves cracks, and through those cracks, the truth seeps out. A letter, folded inside a priest's robe, unsigned, unaddressed. Just 8 words, written in faded ink. She screamed, and none of us moved. A midwife's notes, tucked in a sealed chest stained with something brown, something ancient. The hours of labour, the weight of the child, and then one final line. The mother lost too much. In a palace garden, a statue crumbles. Its head is gone, its arms broken. Once it held a baby carved in stone. Now only the plaque remains, barely legible beneath moss and time. It reads, "The Queen of Peace." But peace was never hers. In the family Bible, her name has been scratched out, a gouge in the parchment, a silence where a life should be. They did not erase her, they buried her. They pressed her under layers of hymns, paintings, lies, but fragments remain, a word, a note, a broken statue, a missing name. And when you gather these pieces, when you hold them together in your hands, you see her, not the saint they invented, not the legend they carved, the girl, the child, the queen whose crown was a wound. They wanted her forgotten, but she lingers, in cracks, in whispers, in the spaces they could not seal. And these fragments force us to remember. You're carrying her now, her story, her silence, her truth. The crown they pressed upon her head was not glory. It was a wound. Her womb was not her own. It was the kingdom's throne. Her body was not cherished. It was a battlefield. She was 12, a child who deserved laughter, freedom, time. Not vows forced upon her lips, not nights stolen behind locked doors, not a deathbed carved into destiny. They told the world she was holy. They painted her serene. They called her sacrifice divine, but we know better. She was not fragile. She was not willing. She was not chosen. She was taken, used, buried. And this is why we rage. When you speak of queens, do not speak with reverence. Speak with fury. When you remember crowns, do not forget the wounds beneath them. When you hear of thrones, remember the children forced to build them with their blood. She cannot tell her story, but you can. You must. If her silence aches in you, if her truth demands to be heard, share it. Keep it alive. Do not let the hymns and the paintings win, because history tried to bury her. But together we can raise her name, subscribe, stay with us, carry her voice forward, so that silence never wins again.